Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying the show, please do me a favor and leave us an honest rating and review. Let us know what you love about the show and help us make the show even better for you. And if this is your first time listening, well, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we got a special show for you. We're going to be talking to Bryan Chavis. Bryan has spent the last 2 decades building successful real estate ventures. His best-selling books, Buy It, Rent It, Profit, and The Landlord Entrepreneur are considered essential guides for investors looking to build lasting wealth through multifamily real estate. Now, Bryan is also the runner of a private equity firm called Chavis Capital, and he also launched the MultiFamily Matrix Academy, which is all about coaching and consulting to help leaders get into the real estate space with their certification. Let's welcome to the show, Bryan Chavis.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Hey, listen, I went over your bio at a high level. Why don't you take a minute or two and give us just a little bit more context?
Yeah, I thought you did a good enough job. At the end of the day, you hit all the highlights. So, yeah, I think my background would make the background special if you had to kind of target in on something specific. It's just the close to 30 years experience in the actual multifamily space. The books are great. Buy, Rent, and Profit actually is probably the only book in the real estate or multifamily space that's in the U.S. Library of Congress. And I believe that's because my focus has always been on the operational side of things. So I think that's what your listeners will get the most out of. I let folks can talk about markets and, have various different opinions about various different markets. But the one consistency, no matter what market you're in, is how fundamentally sound are you at the operational level, no matter what level of syndication you're in. That's important. Are you the type of syndicator that is going to lean heavily on the third-party property management? And if so, how is that relationship? Are you handing that person when you underwrite a project? Are you creating a management plan alongside that underwriting? And do you hand that management plan over to the property manager and say, this is how I want you to run my property? Or do you just simply hand over your portfolio to a third-party property manager in some instances? And if that's the case, then you definitely should be listening to today's episode because, most people are going to wonder why they invest in their money with you and not the property management company. So you want to understand what it takes to operate these properties at the level. And just real quick, when you're talking to an audience, get right to the point. There's really 5 phases of this industry that are extremely important. It's the acquisition phase, the implementation, stabilization, growth, and then the exit strategy. Those are the 5 phases that you've got to master. Acquisition is what most folks talk about. John, everybody, that's the sexiest part of multifamily. That's the sexiest part of investing, period. Just underwriting projects, throwing it in the spreadsheet and understanding what net present value is, discount rates, cash on cash returns. That's fun. But then the implementation is really where it's won and lost. It's implementing the proper systems, how to run the property day to day, from your procedures manuals that identify the work that needs to be done, then tell the user how to go about performing that work consistently. And when you can do that consistently, then obviously you can move into profitability. And that's what this business is about. At the end of the day, we're in this, to be profitable. And it's very difficult to become profitable if you're not operating the properties from, a system, some sort of business system. So at the end of the day, that's what the implementation, the stabilization is just monitoring those systems, maximizing income, minimizing the expenses through the periodic operations of that property. And then you're going to move into the next phase, which is growth naturally, right? Barring any kind of pandemic like a COVID that pops up, and then you have to know how to adjust, right? But it's kind of hard to adjust when you have no operating systems, no compass. So once you're in the growth, then obviously you're looking at the final stage, which is the disposition, i.e. the exit stage. So those are the 5 phases. If you can navigate those, and you should be navigating those, and have a basic understanding, but not a basic, but a full knowledge and understanding how to navigate each of those phases. And, for me, that's probably the most important aspect of who I am and what I do, is understanding how to navigate those 5 phases.
Listen, right off the bat, you hit us with some great information, right? Let's break it down. You mentioned the 5 phases, right? So first we have the acquisition, which quite frankly, that's what most people focus on. But then you get into the implementation, the stabilization, the growth, and then finally the exit. And we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about those other phases. Real quick, when you look at those 5 different phases, where do you see most investors having a hard time?
To be honest, it's right there in the implementation. It's off the rip. You either know or you don't. Because most, especially, and again, everything is granular, everything you can dig deeper. But I'm trying to consider our audience. So when you consider our audience, again, it's, some folks that are just making that turn, right? They've done this before. They might have not mastered any of the phases, but they got a basic understanding. They've got some experience. Probably a little bit more than what they bargained for through the COVID situation. Not to date the episode, but obviously a lot of us are looking at that and how to navigate through it. What is it going to look like post? And so, really at the end of the day, that implementation phase is the most important, because that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where things are won and lost, day-to-day operations, Monday through Sunday. And no matter where you are, what level, you have to really have mastered that. And I know most people say, well, yeah, but I learned in these trainings that you just hand that off to a third-party property management company. But at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, you get sued. The third-party property management company, if I'm giving you $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of my hard-earned money, I'm not questioning the property management company. I'm coming after you when if something goes wrong. So, it's not the property management company that's holding the risk. It's not the property management company that is put their name on that PPM. So that private placement memorandum, it doesn't really mention the property management company. They're at no fault if something goes wrong. You are as a syndicator. So to imply or to even think that you would just hand that off after the underwriting and think that everything should be fine is it's probably, that's where we would have to probably reverse that thinking. And then for the seasoned operators, just always tightening up operations, because then, a lot of folks went into 2021, right? Eyes wide open, or 2020, eyes wide open. Market's doing well, economy's doing well. Everyone's excited. And then come March, we're hit with this COVID, and then, life has changed as we know it. Operations have changed. How did you get ahead of this? There's a lot of prudent, investors. And one of the first things I did was, get with our property managers and poll everybody. I wanted to pull the rent roll reports, and I want contact with each and every one of our tenants. I want to know, where are they in their financial, create a checklist, find out where they are in their, or do they have enough savings? Do they need to have a further conversation about, us letting them out of their lease now before it gets worse? We wanted to get ahead of this whole moratorium and holding tenants, that weren't paying rent, but obviously wear and tear on the particular units, was going on. We wanted to avoid a lot of that. So we wanted to get ahead well before moratoriums and things really started taking place. And that became in the forefront. I wanted to really understand what our residents were going through. Some said, no, I'm good. I've got savings. And, I wanted an idea. Well, how much savings do you have? So we had a profile of each and every one of our tenants. We knew, well, they say they have 6 to 9 months savings. This person says, no, they actually are concerned. And then we escalated that. We had conversations, and we knew how to get them to sign certain documents to where, cash for keys. Well, we gave them money to actually vacate, because during a pandemic, I've been through I won't say many a pandemic. I've been through many a crisis. And the one thing that I will always say is I'd rather have a vacant unit during a crisis, because when you hit the pause button, like what has happened when the government and local municipalities hit the pause button, did they really hit the pause button? They just hit the pause button on your ability to collect rent effectively. but they're not hitting the pause button on the wear and tear that goes on in your common areas and the wear and tear that's going on your properties. So, just really understanding, at the operational and beefing up our property managers to understand how to deal with someone that says, no, I'm not going to pay rent. Here's my moratorium. I'm going to follow the moratorium. Or what does that mean? That they actually got to physically hand you a document that says, hey, listen, I filed for X, Y, and Z. I can pause the eviction. So you simply just can't say, well, I don't have money as a tenant and then not pay your rent. There's procedures that you have to go through to legally be able to do that. So what does that look like? Do my property managers know what that looks like? Do they have the proper systems? So we already have a system on how we operate the property, how we retrofitted that system. I also then want to know exactly what our qualifying criteria looks like. So I have properties located in the core market, downtown St. Pete. I wanted to say, okay, let's change the qualifying criteria. It's more than 1 month's rent for anyone in the service industry. We need to kind of probably put more buffers in place for individuals that are in the service industry because they're at risk. So, we had to make some changes to the qualifying criteria. We don't want to move a tenant that's in the retail space and then have their restaurant closed down and they just moved in. Right. So now they just signed a year lease and the restaurant's closed down. So, how do we circumvent that? How do we protect ourselves as owners and operators? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to look at the qualifying criteria. What is the gateway? That's the gateway. So make adjustments there, put buffers in place to be able to protect us, to hedge us against some of that risk. So these are some of the things that, and even the skill, to be honest with you, John, even skilled operators are like scratching their head when I have to walk through this process. I've got property managers that have been doing this longer than I have that are like scratching their head and like, wow, I didn't think of that. We didn't. But so, that's why, understanding these 5 phases is so important.
And I think too, like what stands out to me is first and foremost, just the speed, right? And being able to stop, check, pay attention to what's happening and then get an assessment, what's happening with our residents, where they at financially, who's going to need assistance, who's good. And then those folks who need assistance, let's get ahead of the conversations. The folks I know who have really not had a big interruption in their business were very proactive in those conversations and very similar to what you said, start talking to the residents. This was not a time to sit back and see what happens. If they don't make the rent payment, then we'll go through our 5-day notice. No, you need to get ahead of this, have those conversations in advance. If someone was struggling, let them know what resources they had available to them. Because I think people were hearing eviction moratorium and believing that, oh, I can't be evicted. And you really need to get ahead of that conversation so that when they do their research, they see, oh, okay, no, I do need to pay rent, or at least make every means necessary, every step to go ahead. And if I can't pay directly, there are resources out there that can assist me. Right. I want to go back, right? Because obviously COVID's its own situation. But when you talk about implementation, you look to take over a property, what are some of the steps that you make sure you do, right? Because the acquisition we've talked about, right? But that day when you sign all the loan docs, you get that, the agreement is completely done. And now you are the owner, or you are the person responsible for this multifamily apartment building. What are one of the first things that you do to implement your business plan with the property management firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that process actually happens during the underwriting. So most people think and most companies probably do operate where, the underwriting is the underwriting. But for me, there's a process in the underwriting to where, as an asset manager, a portfolio manager, I sit with the team and we begin developing the management plan right alongside the underwriting. So when you talk about day 1, which let's say we show up on the property on Monday, we kind of already know exactly what needs to happen. We've already done, if we're already in that market, we've already done our COTA process, which is a strategic evaluation of a target area, which we've identified employment, average household income, average household size, demographics, psychographics. Demographics tells you who they are. Psychographics tells you the why behind the decisions they make. So we already have a strong understanding of who that prospect tenant profile is. And so think of it like a store. You're going to open up a store in the market, you got to know who that demographic is. That's why Walmart and CVS, they ask you all these questions, and your receipt used to be this big and now your receipt is as long as your elbow. or to your finger to your elbow, the receipts, and they know exactly what you've been buying in those stores because it's a demographic, psychographic profile. So they know what to offer you and also how to stock the shelves. That's why the items on Walmart differ from zip code to zip code because they understand who's coming in and out of those doors. And you have to think of the same thing when you're buying multifamily is that you have a product. And so day one, you've got to understand who the demographic and psychographics are of that product you're selling and tap into that. And so that management plan needs to recognize that, and then it needs to create the operational systems behind that to operate the property Monday through Sunday. It's not just as easy as plugging in property management software and everybody thinks everything is going to be, it wasn't property management software that had me navigate the COVID crisis or the 9/11 crisis. So you can't depend on just having operational systems. And when you talk about operational systems, those are even granular. You split that up into two. You have what you call hard systems and soft systems. Hard systems are the property management software, or soft systems are the property management software. Hard systems are the procedures manuals. Software didn't tell me, hey, I think you need to change the qualifying criteria. That was a human that made that decision. That was me that said, okay, what is our risk? What is our exposure to risk? The software didn't say, hey, listen, you had 10 pieces of traffic today. 7 of them were from the service industry. And, their verified income is a little bit, and, they're served, by the way, our governor said that they're going to shut down the bars. As the software, we recommend that you redo your qualifying criteria. Software hasn't gotten that far yet. So obviously it takes a human being to make those decisions and circumvent it. Then the software can be changed where the qualifying criteria, you adjust to make those changes. So the soft systems and hard systems are two types of systems. The hard systems are the things that, really that you're honed in on. And all this information comes from the COTA process, from which is done, previously before you ever even identify a property. So, buying and acquiring multifamily property has really nothing to do with bricks and mortar. Brick and mortar has never paid me rent. People pay me rent. So I study the individuals, the prospect tenants, more than I actually study anything relevance to the area where we invest. And so at the end of the day, that's where it really starts. So when you for your listeners, when they say, what do you do on Monday, man, Monday has been well thought out 2 years. What we're going to do Monday when we show up, after the closing table, we've already known what we are going to do a year prior to that, if that makes sense. So it's not, I don't want your viewers to think, okay, on Monday, what are we doing? We knew what we were doing 360 days ago on Monday when we show up. And every good operator should, every good syndicator, fund, partnership, single operator, everyone should know this.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying too is like, listen, you have that experience where you kind of know what you're doing and you have that manual, those procedures in place. You mentioned the COTA, which I believe was a strategic evaluation of a target area, right? So you are now sitting down with your team at the beginning when you're underwriting the deal, you're developing that, the takeover plan so that day one, you guys are ready to run. For someone who's not that advanced, right? Maybe this is their first property, their first acquisition. They don't have all of that ready to go right now. What can they do to help prepare themselves to take over a new project?
Yeah. So don't think for a minute, John, that I go off of memory, so I have a 300 some odd plus checkpoint that breaks down. And I've done a podcast, my own podcast, where I've broken down, that's what's different about my podcast. I just really stick on the operational side of things. So like I'll take my spreadsheet or we'll do a podcast with me actually doing an underwriting. And you'll see I have a spreadsheet that breaks 300 checkpoints down from the exterior of the property to the forensic audit of the leasing staff and all of the contract files and maintenance shed checkpoints for the audit of maintenance, maintenance man's last 90-day orderings and what the maintenance shed looks like. I mean, this checklist breaks down every aspect. So I don't really lean on my own understanding. I lean on the systems because the systems identify the work that needs to be done, and I just carry out the systems. Because the one thing that I cannot do is depend on myself. because if you're building a business and I'm trying to scale in any way, shape, or form, the one thing that you're going to do is rely on yourself. And that's the one thing that's going to get you in trouble. If you rely on your own skill sets, I have to be able to figure out a way to copy myself multiple times. So the only way I can do that is through systems. The franchise model, what Ray Kroc talked about when he developed McDonald's, that franchise business model is brilliant. That's what you have to do as a budding entrepreneur. No matter, I don't care if we're talking about a lemonade stand. We're talking about funds and syndications right now, but if you ran a lemonade stand, you need to systemize it. And so that is what I've done. I've systemized it. So we go through this 300-point checklist and nothing gets missed, because I'm going to be honest with you. Some days when I'm showing up on due diligence, my mind is not always on due diligence. I got a 5 and a 2-year-old, or just turned 3. My mind is not always the sharpest. I'm not always on point, and I'm not always emotionally there or checked in. And if anybody thinks that they're going to be in business and 300 some odd days out of the year be emotionally checked in 24/7, then you're fooling yourself. So you have to rely on your business system. So we have a set of systems that we've created. And when we talk about the consulting programs and the coaching programs that I do, that's the focus. It's really teaching you how to franchise this business. Even though if you're not going to be a franchise, I'm just using the word franchise because we can all understand what I mean, that you can take any model, put it in China, put it in Singapore, put it in, in Europe, and it runs the same. The KFCs run the same. The McDonald's run the same because of the business model, the franchise business model. And so that is what you do. You have to franchise your system. So if you're a listener right now and you're trying to figure out how to scale, and you're trying to figure out really, as I enter into the business, what do I need to focus on? Forget real estate, man. Forget multifamily. The model, the system, the operations. That is what you've got to master. Then you can enter into the business. Once you have a business model or a system, then you enter into the business with that model. Now you can compete.
Yeah, those systems, I mean, they're so key. We hear this all the time, right? From the most successful companies, the most successful operators, they have systems that they follow. And I think that's a huge clue and a huge insight, just to make sure we are thinking about those systems and what those steps are. Because quite frankly, yes, you can hire a phenomenal property manager. You can hire a great asset manager or work with a great asset manager, but that's relying upon that individual. And if that person leaves, or that person they're no longer available, all of that knowledge, all that wisdom goes with them. So if you can extract that and keep this simple, and it's like a restaurant. You mentioned McDonald's, but there are all sorts of different restaurants where I can go across this country and I know exactly what to expect with the meal. Now, the challenge with that is you go to some of these 5-star restaurants, 4-star restaurants, it depends on the chef. I mean, if that chef changes, he leaves, and that whole meal maybe tastes very different.
Or has
right?
an attitude that day.
Has it just in a bad mood and just whatever, mood, right? They're freestyling it, going off emotion, and it's a different experience. So as you're building a business, you really want to keep it repeatable, right? And those systems allow you to do that. I know it's more work up front, and whether you are tapping into some of the resources that someone like Bryan has, or creating your own, document those steps and make your team document, all of those things. So at least you have what you've been doing or how you're doing it. And then you can analyze what's not working. Hey, what do we miss here? Oh, okay, we only did this. We missed that. Okay, now you start to understand how you can evolve your systems. And for a lot of people who are looking to maybe bring on VAs or assistants or team members, you have to have those processes.
You can't bring on,
pass it off.
You can't bring on or talk and think expansion until you've mastered that model. If whether you call it that franchise model or the system model, you cannot not have that framework developed and think about scaling in any way, shape, or form, or even thinking about taking a step back and enjoying your life. The idea behind getting involved with real estate, I'm not particularly, when people say, what is your passion? My passion is not particularly real estate. It's just the ways, for me, my passion is my family. My passion is golf, right? My livelihood gives me the lifestyle and the ability to pick my kids up in another 2 hours and spend time and hang out and go to the Y and do all the things we do. Take my kid to tutoring. Tuesdays and Thursdays and have that luxury. You can't step away and have these luxuries without having the business systems in place. So you can be thinking about building and making millions of dollars as an entrepreneur and developer and multifamily. And but if you're not thinking about this aspect of the business, the operations, and you're leaning on someone else's understanding, then this thing this foundation has been built on sand.
Bryan, we talked a lot about systems and operations. Let's talk about the MultiFamily Matrix. This is a platform that you've developed. Explain why you developed it and how it helps other investors.
I think we did a wonderful job explaining it right through this whole entire podcast. Hey, listen, if you want to navigate those 5 phases and you want to master it, I think you said something, John, that's important. You can develop it yourself, or, you can tap into the resource. Developing yourself for me, has never been a wise. Picasso said, good artists is copy, great artists is steal. I'm not interested in trying to sit and rethink and develop stuff from scratch. I'd rather tap into somebody that's done it and has done it multiple times, and has a proven model. And then, the ability for us to train off of that model. That is the multifamily matrix. So if any of these operations and understanding how to navigate those 5 phases, you want to know how to navigate them, you want the systems to navigate those, then that is what the multifamily matrix is. Something that is always constantly in motion. There's always constant development. Who would ever thought we were in COVID, right? Who's ever talking about post-COVID? How's this going to affect insurance, property taxes, interest rates? The 2 things we need to be focused on are interest rates and inflation. How is that going to affect the multifamily? What does this do after the 10-year? How's this going to, these refinances, what's going to happen? Most of these projects are not going to be able to refi. There's just going to be a ton of issues that no one's really forecasting or talking about. There's a major issue between the 80 and 150 unit range. These single operators, some people call them mom and pops, whatever you want to categorize them, there's going to be issues where they can no longer keep kicking that can down the road, that they have to address the issues. So, as for moratoriums lift, what happens? People are going to still owe that money. Where are they going to collect it from? So it's just, there's a ton. Yes, you can go to some landlord resources and things like that, but that's not going to save everybody. There's just not going to be ability to save every operator that's out there. So newly minted syndicators who are over leveraged promise a certain return, right? And the only way they can get that return to be more attractive than other offerings that are out there is to be able to offer higher return. I mean, obviously that's what we're all trying to do, but what lever do we always pull or what most inexperienced pull to get that? Not through the operations, not through the value add, through the operations that me and you talked about today. The easiest way for someone that doesn't have experience at the operational level is to use leverage to obtain those higher returns, not the business systems and figuring out how to get the value add through understanding the demographics, the psychographics of that prospect tenant, honing in on that and changing the maximizing the income and minimizing expenses through operations. No, the easiest way to get you that return from the inexperienced or lazy or whatever you want to call it is to pull that lever and use leverage. And that's fine. But in moments, in certain situations, that pulling that lever can actually, cause, probably add more risk, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
You think you're circumventing one problem, but you really just brought on 10 more, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to see
definitely
that.
different ways that, there's risk in a deal. So, I mean, I think your point is just spot on, right? There's different ways to look at it. And I mean, if you can execute, as you talked about the implementation, stabilizing those properties, that's going to be the best way to actually provide value for you and your investors.
Yes.
MultifamilyMatrix.com is the website, right? So go check out MultifamilyMatrix.com to learn more about the operational side of the business, learn more about what Bryan has to offer there. Bryan, I want to switch a little bit, right? Because you started talking more about the future and what's going to happen, and what happens when the COVID relief dries up, what happens when these moratoriums are completely lifted, which quite frankly, hopefully by the time this airs, those moratoriums have lifted by then. But we also talked kind of before we hit record that if you look at it right now, 2021, 10 years ago was 2011, when the multifamily industry and real estate in general really started to pick up and kind of start this 10-year high that we're on right now. 2016, 5 years ago, was a time frame where some thought the market was a little bit heated and kind of wanted to wait and see what was going to happen. So I know that a lot of those loans coincide with those 5 and 2 year time frames. What do you see as the outlook as we go forward from the rest of this year and next year and beyond?
I unfortunately don't have a solid way forward that I've kind of developed, but what I can do is tell you what I'm looking at. So what I'm looking at is opportunities between the 80 and 150 unit count, because those are typically your single, again, mom and pop, for the lack of a better word, operators, to where I might see some opportunities as projects come back, our property comes, on the market, or be able to find something, off market. Keeping my eye on, obviously, like everyone, the 10-year treasury. We're looking at interest rates and where we think interest rates may tick up to, how fast. And then also, the effect of inflation on the market, how the Feds react. Right now, I feel like the Fed's reaction to everything is to print money. It's the easy thing to do to keep a lot of the situations that we have and the problems that we have at bay. And you may see more of this because it's, let the next person deal with it. That's kind of the mentality. And so, it's just really understanding how we're going to be able to navigate that. Those are the areas that I'm looking at. I don't really have a plan formulated other than, like I said, really keeping my eye on, all of these loans coming to maturity and these refi options now, putting a lot of these investors that have to make these decisions on what happens to their property. I feel like there's some opportunities there. And again, my sweet spot probably be that 80 to 150 unit count. I don't really see many institutional investors losing the wheels or leaking that much more oil than what they've already done. And I think they can kind of fix that in-house with whomever their loans are placed with. But, for me right now, those are the things that I'm looking at is just how we react. It's just so early right now, John, for me to say, I don't know, if there's another variant that comes out, now people are kind of getting vaccine fatigued and people are like, oh, I'll get my shot next week. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So right now, when there's a lot of uncertainty, like what I like to do, I just like to kind of forecast and predict, and I like to sit and watch. But I do predict some opportunities in there's always opportunities in multifamily. So you even could say, you said that you think the market is, we're at the highs. Where are cap rates going to be in another 9 months to a year, right? Do people feel like they're going to see an uptick in cap rates with interest rates, increasing? I beg to differ. I think that cap rates probably will stay compressed, probably through 2023 for various different reasons. But again, I'm keeping my eye on all the little, all my indicators that I feel like, that give me the right type of, forecasting ability, keep my eye on that yield curve. So yeah, I'm tapping in and understanding, looking at various different markets, because how my core markets are going to respond, they're going to respond different to the affordable housing market. So I do a lot of consulting for affordable housing authorities, right? So really understanding how housing authorities and how that affordable housing are navigating that C- product gives me some great insight, because a lot of what's going to happen is going to impact your medium wage earners. So how does that impact these individuals, which is going to result in the impact of that Class C product? So, these are all the things that I'm looking at. So there's not one answer that I have right now. It's just keeping my eye on all my, my gauges, and constantly making adjustments like any good pilot would. You're constantly ongoing, you're making adjustments according to what the gauges are reading back to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's great insight though, right? I mean, there's a lot of different factors. You have to pay attention to it. You mentioned the treasury, looking at interest rates, looking at inflation, looking at just sellers or current owners, that 80 to 150 unit space. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, but the one thing that we can control is our operations. And I think that's the big takeaway from our conversation here is, optimize the operations, make sure that you are in a position to control when you exit right now. So if you are banking on refinancing in 12 or 24 months, you better put yourself in a position to do that, because interest rates may be in a completely different place. While we think cap rates may still be compressed, none of us have a crystal ball. So just make sure you're focusing on the operations, protecting yourself, investors if you have investors, and setting yourself up for big success. Bryan, you've got a great podcast as well. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but it's Buying the Block, right?
Yep, Buy the Block.
Buy the Block. Yeah, so that's available anywhere you're checking this out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Be sure to check out Buy the Block as well. Bryan, we are going to go to our bullseye round. You ready?
Ready.
All right, Bryan, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Failure, 2008, lost a couple of properties within the portfolio, probably like everyone. But probably the biggest, I don't know if you can call it a failure, but probably the biggest challenge was my brain tumor in 2012. And that's kind of, why a lot of folks are probably like, yeah, I remember that guy. I read that book, Bryan. Where has he been for the last, we haven't seen much of him. All of a sudden now here he is again. But, I had to obviously go away and take care of that for the past 3 to 5 years. So probably, the brain tumor has been the biggest, I don't necessarily call it failure, but the biggest challenge that's given me the greatest amount of insight on what it takes, why are we really doing this? What's the real why behind, wanting to buy the block, wanting to buy multifamily, what is the real why behind it? So, it kind of helped me have a deeper understanding of that, and then a deeper understanding of when it's all said and done, what's your legacy look like, and making sure that has something to do with giving back and sowing seeds into others and being of service. So,
Thank you for that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us today. That's heartfelt, and I think it just goes back to show, like, hey, the numbers are one thing, the apartments are one thing, but the reason we do this is for you and I know, at least, we both have small children. We want to set them up. We want to spend time with them while we have it. We know tomorrow's not promised, so we need to take advantage of the time we have today. And this affords us the time flexibility to do that. And I know a lot of other people are looking to create that for themselves as well. So thank you for sharing that. All right, back to the bullseye round. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
God, there's so many. But one thing that I think your listeners will probably enjoy that I've seen is Red IQ. It's been a underwriting platform that I've looked at, and I like it. Livable is another one where it allows you to not put meters on your property, but the water usage and consumption you can do digitally. I know I said that wrong, but you don't have to slap a water meter on your units anymore. So those have been some cool resources that I can see helping out smaller operators in technology and using. Of course, MultiFamily Matrix I consider a technology. So, an online platform for constant certifications and training. So throw me up there.
All right. Outside of your own books, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Well, The Richest Man in Babylon is always one of my favorites, right? So a lot of people know that one. I'm constantly in the Bible. I downloaded it. You can look at this as a book, or your previous question, the technology, the Bible app. It's one of my favorites because it gives you can type in entrepreneur and it gives you a bunch of 3 to 7 day programs, right? That can help an entrepreneur from a spiritual side of things. So I really enjoy that. And then one of my favorite strategic books is the Book of Five Rings, Go Ring No Show, written by Miyamoto Musashi. Spent several months in Japan, and he was obviously one of the things I wanted to do was follow his footsteps in Japan. But his book has been a great book on strategy, and I find that extremely useful as I discipline myself.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Prayer, meditation. Yeah.
What are you curious about right now?
Whoa, you can't ask a man that's gone through a brain tumor and battled life and death what he's curious about now. So, brother, you don't have enough time you don't have enough time on this podcast. So I'm not even.
Give me the top thing. What's right now? Right now, what are you thinking about? Like, what's the top thing that you're curious about right now?
Oh man,
not real estate related. Just give me anything.
Man, listen, I keep trying to tell you, real estate is not on my mind. I mean, in another hour, it's gonna be my swing because I'm headed out to work on my game. I give a couple of hours to golf every day. But really, man, it's more spiritual. The thing that I'm more curious about is spirituality. The stuff that I was faced with, I wouldn't even put that on the enemy. The things I seen, I couldn't even, like I said, it's doing the show and the listeners an injustice for me to even try. I have to use it as a hook for you to force me to come back on another. But right. Really, it's the curiosity of the spiritual side. It's really understanding how to, there's more to what we do, and there's more to this than this physical, and being caught up on being divided on one side, red, blue. You know what I mean? It's just so much division. Hate a cop, love a cop. Hate this, hate that, everything is just so divisional. And I will say this, I encourage everybody to read, I think it's Mr. Diamond from Chase, the CEO. He just came out with this letter. Read that, Google it, find it, read it. But he goes into far more depth on a lot of various things that are going on. So my curiosity is at a level on mankind and more so on spirituality. And then just simply how can I then clean myself up spiritually to be able to then step back into this world and impact individuals, whether it be through our podcast, our coaching programs. How do we get ourselves clean, then step back in and impact others? Because right now, man, it's really messy right now, and there's so much division and there's so much hate that other countries, people like China already look at us as a thing of the past, an empire of the past. China doesn't even look at us as a competitor anymore. So it's like, they now they even have a tool that they're like, oh my goodness, we didn't even have to come up with, a way to infiltrate their technology, steal this or steal that. They're killing themselves. They're dividing themselves. This is great. All we gotta do is throw more gasoline on it, and they will implode. And so just really understanding, man, that, hey, listen, guys, leadership and self-development and understanding, when you're talking about that curiosity, is really stop thinking about yourself. The curiosity has to begin, you have to begin to, if you really want to tap into it, the curiosity has to begin outside yourself. The curiosity has to begin with your neighbor, and individuals who don't look like you, who don't look like us. So that curiosity goes beyond. So that's kind of where I am. It's not even in multifamily. It's not even in real estate, bro. When I'm out there on the golf course, I'm very rarely thinking multifamily. I've gotten to a point where, as you know, through the systems and the things I do, the multifamily can operate itself. I'm more so I feel like I'm at a different plane right now, but hopefully that helps. I know that was more than what you asked for, but
no, but I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's helpful to understand just where you're coming from mentally and the way you're looking at the world. But to continue to lighten the mood a little bit, you're in Tampa, right? So I got to ask you, give me the best place to grab a bite to eat.
Ooh, I'm working on that right now. I got kids, brother, so I got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So the best places for me are probably not going to be the best place for a person visiting. So, they just opened up Midtown. We've got so many great restaurants. If I mention one, somebody's going to listen to this podcast and be upset with me that I didn't mention their restaurant. Just come to Tampa, enjoy yourself. See me. I've got great Airbnb in downtown. I've got a great apartment building. We've got a few Airbnbs. You're more than welcome to be my guest and just taste all, experience, downtown St. Pete and Tampa for yourself.
I love it. Bryan, listen, man, you gave a lot of great information today. What stood out to me was really talking about just the really the need to emphasize operations and systems, and really understanding like how to look at opportunities, how to protect yourself, and kind of what you were saying before. You have to have a lens where you are focused on building something bigger than what you can do, or just getting an all-star property manager, but really create the systems that allow you to have success no matter what's going on in the marketplace, whether it's COVID or recession or anything else. And I think that's really the big takeaway. Your website, MultiFamily Matrix, is where people can learn more about those operational systems. And then they can check out you or your podcast and rest of your content at bryanchavis.com. We'll make sure we link to that. I want to thank you again for coming on the show today, man. You take care, and I hope you have a great one.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm a big fan, so thank you.